Hi, my name is Petre-Ann Williams. I've been asked to share a portion of my testimony with you. There's a saying that basically says you can't have a testimony without a test, and I was put through the test. For anybody that knows me, you know that I pride myself in being physically fit. You would always find me either riding my bicycle for miles on end, or I'd be jogging in the neighborhood, or at the school that I worked at, I would go out on the track and jog. I would race the students. I was the epitome of health as I knew it, and life has a way of changing in an instant. There were signs along the way, and I didn't realize that the signs were a premonition of things to come. I realized that when I was running, I was having episodes where I was having difficulty breathing. My chest would feel as if it was going to give out. My head would start spinning, and sometimes I would feel like I was going to pass out. And I thought to myself, you really need to go see your cardiologist and find out what's going on with you. So I did take a trip to my cardiologist. My cardiologist ordered a stress test, and I passed the test with flying colors. And the cardiologist basically said, after reviewing the results, that there's nothing wrong with you. Everything so far looks good. Maybe you need to go back to your primary care and see if they can run some other tests to find out why you're having the issues that you're having. Fast forward to 2018, I went on a trip with my husband. It was our 20th anniversary, and we took a trip to Vegas. And I realized while I was there that something was eerily wrong, because I became, as I call it now, deathly sick. So I did call my cardiologist. They were going to run another test, another stress test, as I was going to the doctor that day to have my stress test done. But I had an eerie feeling that day. As I sat in the waiting room, I kept saying to myself, I don't feel good. Something just is a little bit off. And I did something I'd never done before in my entire life. As a grown adult, I decided I was going to call my mother as I sat there in the waiting room. I called, but I did not get her. When I called, and I left a message on her voicemail, I said, Mom, I'm sitting here. I'm waiting to do the stress test portion of my heart test, and I felt compelled to give you a call just to let you know that I love you. For all that it means, I love you. And just know that. My name was called. I went in to the doctor's office. I got on the treadmill, and everything was beautiful, just as I thought it was going to be. As the test came to an end, and they turned off the machine, and I was getting off the treadmill, and I looked up at the doctor as I stepped off the treadmill, and I said to my cardiologist, I don't feel good. I think I'm going to go down. And little did I know that those were my dying words, because that's exactly what happened. The next thing I knew, and I don't know how long I was gone, I was out for, I opened my eyes, and there I laid, and there were seemingly 100 people that were working on me. I looked over and I saw my cardiologist to the side, and she says, we need your husband's number. We need to get in touch with him immediately. I could not remember my name. I could not tell you what year it was. Ironically enough, I remembered my husband's number, and I spoke it quietly to her. What I come to find out is that when I stepped off the treadmill that day, I went into cardiac arrest, and I dropped dead on the floor. I later came to find out that my heart rate stepping off of that treadmill went up to over 300 beats per minute. That I went into something that they call supraventricular tachycardia. And I completely flatlined when I dropped on the ground and was completely dead at the time. So I thank the Lord that I was at a cardiologist's office, and that the cardiologist's office was attached to the hospital, because when the ambulance came, they literally wheeled me several hundred feet from the cardiologist's office straight into the emergency room, where they began working on me furiously. I spent a long time in ICU, and the decision was made to take me by ambulance after several days in ICU over to regional hospital so that they could do surgery and try and figure out what was going on and implant a defibrillator in me. They couldn't figure out Why my heart went out that day? Because everything came up clear. I had no blockage in my heart. So the defibrillator was placed in my heart. I was off to pretty much learn how to begin doing certain things again, because the doctors had no idea what had caused it. When I was finally discharged from the hospital, I was discharged with instructions of you cannot drive over the next 6 months. And basically I had to learn how to do a couple things all over again, because when the defibrillator is first planted in you, your arm feels like a brick. You feel like you can't lift your arm because there is additional weight that's been placed on your chest. And it took a little getting used to. And then I was afraid to walk. I literally was. I was afraid to get up and go outside my home. I was afraid to make an attempt to walk around in my cul-de-sac. And that took a lot. It took a lot to begin learning how to do those things all over again. And fast forward 6 months later, I was back to work. 6 months later, I was able to drive. They gave me the permission to drive, and we were still at a loss. And I became a case study for the hospital, because they couldn't figure out how someone that was in such great health went into cardiac arrest and dropped dead. And there was no answer to what had occurred. Almost a year to the day after that incident, I went on a family vacation. And while I was on the family vacation, I wasn't feeling good. And my brother kept saying to me, maybe it's in your head. And I'm like, no, it's not in my head. I'm telling you, having a real hard time breathing. I would walk 1 or 2 steps and I was completely out of breath. And mind you, the medication I was taking at the time for my heart was giving me a lot of problems. So the doctor at the time had tried 1,000 different beta blockers to try and work with my heart. And it just seemingly wasn't working. I was not a medication type of person. And so they decided to try and slowly wean me off of the medicine that I was on, because it was so problematic. And I would later come to find out, we believe that that might have played a role in the second half of what occurred. Literally, my family, after the family vacation, my husband and my son left to go out of town, and I was going to be home by myself, and I still wasn't feeling well from the vacation. But my husband and my son went out of town, and I was home alone, and I had the wherewithal to let my neighbor across the street, and we've been neighbors for years, I told him exactly what was happening. I told him, I'm not really feeling well. If you don't mind just checking in on me, I'm home alone. It's a little scary when you're by yourself and you're not feeling well. I distinctly remember this day as if it was yesterday. I went to work that day, and everything went well at work. I left work, and I remember stopping at the gas station, and I was like, it was just a weird feeling. I just wasn't feeling good. And I decided, let me make a detour, come home, make myself something to eat, and go and lay down and make it an early night for myself. And I came home that day, and I got around the stove, and I started to cook. And as I was cooking, I knew something wasn't right. Something wasn't right. And I had the wherewithal to pull the food off the fire, and I turned the fire off. And my mind said, you need to get to your cell phone, and you need to get to your cell phone immediately. And my cell phone was in my purse, and my purse was in the front half of my home, near where my front door was. And I dug through my purse, and I grabbed my cell phone, and I was thinking, who can I call? My heart isn't feeling good. Something isn't right. And so my first instinct was to call my sister-in-law. And so I got on the phone, and I tried calling her. I was having a hard time finding her number, but I found her number, and I got on the phone, and I mentioned her name, and I said, Donna, I'm not feeling good. And that's the last thing I remembered saying. And if what happened a year earlier was bad, dying in itself is not a good thing. What happened that day was 1,000 times worse.